Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first time at the Fowler, welcome. And if you have been to the Fowler before, welcome back. Thank you for joining us for Getty PST Art West LA to South LA this weekend. And I just wanted to share a couple ground rules before we begin. No food in the galleries. If you have any food or water bottles, please leave them outside. And number two, we'd like to encourage you to sit actually closer to this side of the gallery. We have a motion censored sound that goes off every time someone walks by it. So if you're able to grab a stool, a mat, a cushion, or you're welcome to also sit on the floor, whatever you feel comfortable doing. But if you could just sit closer to this side. The artist will be centered around the weaving column right here during the program. And with that said, I'd like to pass on the mic to our museum director, Sylvia Forney.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming here. The Fowler Museum at UCLA acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva people as the traditional land caretakers of Tuvangar, the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands. As a land-grant institution, we pay our respects to the Onukvetan, the ancestors, the Ahihirom, elders, and the Yuhinkem, our relatives, past, present, and emerging. I'm Sylvia Forney. I'm the director of the Fowler. I'm really thrilled to see you here today. I just want to welcome you to this space and to this exhibition, Sangre de Nopal, Tanya Aguiñiga and Porfirio Gutierrez in Conversation, which is an exhibition that is curated and it stems from an idea of the team at MCA Santa Barbara, where there is a sort of sister exhibition that opened at the beginning of October. So if you haven't been to Santa Barbara, please go. There's many other artists that work on the themes of indigenous knowledge and cochineal. And we were really thrilled for this partnership and for the opportunity of working with Tanya and Porfirio and our colleagues there. This is, as Hannah mentioned, PST ART West Side Weekend. We want to acknowledge the support of the Getty that made PST possible, this exhibition possible, and all the interesting connections that are happening in the city at this time on the theme of art and science collide. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague Amy Landau to introduce the program.
Thank you, Sylvia. Welcome all. I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sylvia, for the introduction. And thank you to Hannah, you, for organizing such a beautiful event and envisioning today's program. I want to introduce you to the space that you're now in as a means of introducing the artists themselves, Tanya and Porfirio. Well, basically, the space we're in now is called the laboratory. And while the word laboratory might suggest a cold and sterile space of petri dishes and beakers, what we have in this space is anything but. What we have in this space is the kindness, warmth, and collaborative spirit of the two Southern California internationally acclaimed artists we have in front of us today. The lab, which you're now in, is really the heart of the exhibition. The space is inspired by Porfirio and Tanya's artist residencies in Teotitlán Valley, Mexico, a community-based interdisciplinary laboratory in Ventura, California, where Porfirio has his studio, and an exchange at Tanya's studio in LA's Frogtown. All three residencies were shaped by Tanya and Porfirio's community-based practice, their activism, and their mentorship. From the traditional welcome in Zapotec and Mixtec, which we're hearing as we enter this space, to the artist's invitation to weave in the center of the room, to their collaborative work and shared memories encapsulated in the words, pictures, and interactives along the perimeter of the room. This space is a testimony to the warmth and kindness of Tanya and Porfirio. And I think I could speak for the entire Fowler staff to say that it's been an honor to work with them. So school and university students have been using this space to learn about the artists as well as the indigenous ecological knowledge and approaches to cochineal. And what we want to actually roll out today is a special partnership between UCLA Lab School, right here on the campus, and the Fowler Museum, which is based on a residency with Tanya, which is entitled Art and Healing in Nature. So with that, I'm going to join Sylvia and Hannah and welcome the artists. So Tanya and Porfirio, over to you.
I wonder where is best for us to see all the people.
Here? Or is activated here? Maybe here?
Yeah, I think
Is that fair? And we can get closer
Maybe
too.
we can have them
Here?
like that so that they can see.
Yeah. If folks want to come in
You want to
closer,
come over here?
yeah.
Si quieres hacer algo, we'll just like make it more of a circle. Do you guys want to make it more of a circle and come closer?
It'll be very intimate. Please come in closer.
Yeah, I think you guys all sit here. Yeah. Okay, I think this feels better anyway. So thank you guys all for coming. It's such a pleasure to spend time with you. So we were asked just to hang out with you and talk. So I think that maybe the best thing to do that feels most natural to the way we are as friends, Porfirio and I, is just for us to talk and pass this back and forth for a little bit, to maybe talk to you about how we met and how we started working together, maybe like how we each like to work, and then maybe we'll just see how it goes. See? And then when you guys have had enough and you're like, let's get up and do stuff, then we can go do stuff together. Yeah? Does that sound good? And you guys can also ask questions. So my name is Tanya Aguiñiga. I have lived in LA is this even loud enough? I lived in LA for 19 years. I'm originally from Tijuana, Mexico. A thing that I constantly have to tell everybody, and it's fine that I am still having to do it, that I cross the border every day to go to school in the US from 4 to 18, which has really shaped my entire identity. And my background is formally in furniture design, so I was trained as a woodworker and metal worker. But then in grad school, I started going into textiles, and and I've been dipping in and out of community-based work since 1997. And so, mostly craft is what I like to do, and I just decided 2 days ago that, like now, at least right now, or today, I like to call myself a weaver. Sometimes it changes what I want to call myself. But in thinking about all the different things that I'm constantly trying to join, and the way that these different ideas dip over, under, in different parts of my life. Yes, I am a weaver.
Buenas tardes a todos.
No.
I checked our language. Buenas tardes, Sakchida, Shtiziniuta, YouTube. YouTube. Gracias a todos por tomar el tiempo de acompañarnos. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come and join us. And I love how these came a little bit more intimate. Thank you for the conversation throughout these years and time. And of course, the museum, Sylvia, Amy, Hannah, and everyone who has been working so hard to make this possible, aside from the rest of the team in Santa Barbara, Freddie and Audrey, who couldn't be here, Dahlia, and so forth. So I also, for today, I want to say I'm a weaver. I'm a weaver of tradition, culture. I constantly have to think in 3 languages. My first language is Zapotec, and till I got to school, which, by the way, I only went to your school for 6 years. And but then I learned Spanish, and then I learned, and now I'm learning English, and so I'm weaving the languages, weaving the culture, weaving, I think, friendships and so forth. I was born and raised in a community legacy of textile weavers in Teotitlan del Valle. This is in the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. I am a member of the Zapotec Nation. My parents are part of these layers of, I want to say, deep knowledge and school and education that dates back to at least 10,000 years of history. So I feel very privileged to be raised by them and by those understandings and worldviews and integrity. So my childhood has been in farming, very with such a free of creativity. And I came to the loom when I was 12, which I did not enjoy at all. and I'll come back to why. And so, and part of it's because there was not a lot of opportunities. So here I am migrating to Ventura, where I have been living for the last 27 years. That is why I can speak to you in English. So, but yeah, that's kind of like my my foundation as far as a maker, but also, I guess for me, sometimes I ask the question, what is a maker? Who is a maker? What is a maker? Right? To where I come from, it's just a completely different understanding.
Yeah. And you guys that have just come in, there's a bunch of cushions. If you don't mind, like, coming, you can also come into like the middle. And like, there's a whole row of seats. You guys are welcome to come closer.
Make yourself home.
Yeah. So I guess maybe I can also talk about maker, just because you said that. So I have also in a lot of different things, like thought about and grabbed onto the word maker. And for me, that was really important because I couldn't find a way, a lot of times, to like talk about artisanry and like the role that craft plays in other countries, and how in the US it's this other weird thing that kind of gets like constantly pushed down and down and down, below like fine art and all. And like I don't like that in the US we have so many different hierarchies between like art, craft, design, and then like I also really don't like that people like think so badly about like even the word maker. Sometimes I feel like it's constantly shifting. Um, but now a lot of people, like younger people, think of the word maker in relation to technology, which is kind of weird. Um, because there's all these like maker spaces that have access to 3D printers and all these things. But I think that it's really unfortunate that we that like curators and different people constantly kind of criticize whatever it is that we call ourselves um, when it's connected to having to survive and make money, you know, because a lot of times like I'll have studio visits and people will be like, yes, I understand the like museum stuff, but why do you also make bracelets? Or like, why do you also make this other thing? You know, and to like for them, like I feel like a lot of times, and I guess for a lot of people, things have to be like for them to be true, they have to be this one pure thing. And it's kind of weird to have to defend like our need to feed ourselves, pay for space, pay for equipment, for material, for all these things. And so, yeah, so I find it kind of difficult and sometimes like disturbing having to fight for our ability to kind of go in between a lot of things. And you know, and it's always like, oh, well, we were like, I wasn't born into money, like, and I don't have any financial support from anyone other than myself. So I just have to do what I have to do. You wanna?
Yeah, definitely. And I think just to add on to that a little bit and to bring another perspective is in our language, the word artist, it doesn't exist. And so the closest to that word, it's someone with wisdom. So benana, and I often bring these up because I think that the definition of artist could be linear, and if we could, expanding the view, I think that it just enriches our life and understanding. And so, in our culture tradition, when someone is born, and even during the pregnancy, there's a lot of prayers, there's a lot of offerings that's happening around that, especially on the birth of the child. And so once the child is born, the child is being then taken to a spiritual leader within the community. And so the spiritual leader is going to guide the parents and help the parents to understand the gifts. It has to do with like the date, the month. It just, there's so much complexity around that. And so essentially the child is going to fulfill his or her responsibility within the community. And so when I think about artists, and especially through our conversation and our friendship over the years, is very few times that you see two artists with different approach and different understanding. Tanya is more academic and so forth, but to bring us together in a very equal, and not a very, but an equal value. We often obviously are working under someone else, or always the indigenous tradition could be always be oppressed by the higher a market, or the higher designers, artists who has access to market basically. And so it is very rare to see these kind of opportunities to come together, because essentially, yes, I do come from a 10,000 years of school, but that's not actually valid in this a very tight circle of what fine art is. And so up until now, actually when I came to US and resumed my art practice, that's the first time I found out that I was an artist, that people will call me an artist. I'm like, wow, okay, so being a weaver, it's an artist. Well, that's interesting, because that's not what we, within our cultural context, or within our community, we are extremely oppressed by tourism, by the market, by everyone who holds the power of the market, right? And so it was very nice to hear that, but it also is something that I continue to struggle with more than anything. Is that it's something that I obviously welcome, but it's also something that I struggle with for me to just think of myself as an artist and like self proclaim and that higher title of what an artist means in the Western understanding. And so spending time with Tanya, I think that definition gets blurred and was blurred at the very beginning, and coming together into just this creative mind, deep conversation about very personal or about just all these kind of like this kind of conversation that we're having. There was even one point when we're talking when Tanya was like craft back, and she could explain more. And so this was very interesting conversation coming together. Beyond, we didn't really start making things until later. We were just always having these very necessity conversation.
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk about the craft back thing so I don't forget. No, it's good. So I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of land back. So the land back movement in indigenous communities. And so we tend to, we both have like really, yeah, we always have really amazing conversations where we're just like asking, and like trying to figure out these like super like, yeah, like vibrating like questions that we have. I think of each other because our experiences getting to this place, like we're both at the same place right now, and we both got here at the same time, and so our methods to get here were very different, and our lives have taken super different, meandering paths. And so, in thinking about like my relationship to the cochinilla, my relationship to like indigeneity as like a Mexican woman, my responsibility to speak to the racism that exists within the US, within Mexico, within every place around the globe, towards indigenous communities. Like I like constantly am like thinking of all these different things and asking myself, what role do I play in that? What role do I play in benefiting from it? What role do I play in upholding it? What role do I play in dismantling it? And I think a lot of this stuff I was just born with. It doesn't even matter like where I was born. I think I was just always like an instigator. And I think having to, like justify your right to move from one place to another, to constantly being afraid of being kicked out of like school, kicked out of this, kicked out of that, all these things just because, I lived on one side and not the other, made me super, super like allergic to boundaries and like really distrustful and questioning of authority. And so it's helped me that in some of these conversations and as I navigate, like what is okay to do, like in museums, what is it okay to do in all these different situations, that like people have been okay with me asking these questions. And we, in thinking about like us working together for this show, and thinking about cochineal and thinking about, like I said, like indigenous traditions, specifically like from Mexico, I kept thinking about how weird it was that people constantly, I think it happens all over the global south or anywhere where there's people that have less money than another person. Like, why do we think it's okay to show up to someone's art studio or home and be like, show me how to do your things, you know? And then like, oh, and can I have that? And like, no, but I like the one that you're wearing. Like, can I have that? You know? And we have this really unequal relationship a lot of times when we travel. And sometimes just when we, you know, like think that anything like knowledge is like our right to demand. And so in thinking about, you know, what does it mean for me to have Porfirio in my studio? Like, what does it mean for, like, when I go to his space, to Teotitlan, like, you know, like, what am I gonna do? How do I not, like, kind of repeat this cycle of, like, show me your tricks, you know? And so, like, I was just like, you know what? Like, why don't we talk about, like I was like, fuck land back, let's do craft back right now. And so then I was like, why don't you tell me all the different things that you wish that you had learned, like textile wise? And I'm gonna ask a bunch of white artists in LA to show us how to do it. And so it was a super fun. And because, I mean, luckily, because, and I think that, I guess it's not luckily, I think because I have, like, since I was a little kid, operated with a high level of integrity, responsibility, and like sense of justice, you know, and like respect for other people, then I'm, I guess, respected enough in LA that I can call a bunch of people and be like, show me your tricks. We're coming, but we're coming specifically to get white people to teach us how to do stuff. And it was really awesome. We went and we started, like, so then for me, a lot of weaving and a lot of working with fiber kind of lets me access, like, and think about metaphors and think about different layers of thought, layers of existence, and think about, you know, community building and feminism and all these other things that are not just like, oh, you can wear this, you know? And I mean, you can wear whatever I make, but I like thinking of all these other things. And like, I guess assigning meaning or finding meaning in the way that I just navigate stuff. And so, you know, we were talking about like, okay, what do you want to learn? And Porfirio was like, oh, well, I've never woven on more than 2 harnesses. Like the way that, yeah, that Porfirio has learned on the looms that exist in Teotitlan. They have 2 panels of things that go up and down. So the way that I learned at RISD in grad school, you know, by paying an insane amount of crippling debt, was with 8 of those things going up and down, you know? And so I like intuited like, oh, like those are all different like planes of existence and possibility. And I like that we were talking about just kind of like tripping out on like that, but even just like making for the sake of having fun, thinking about memory, thinking about being free, thinking about not having to make something because you have to sell it, so it has to be perfect. And then me, you know, talking to Porfirio about like, oh, I make the stuff crazy, so it never has to be perfect. And I can still sell it. But anyway, so yeah, so we started with like multiple harness technology, and then we like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be able to weave on all these different like layers and planes? And then Porfirio was like, oh, I always wanted to learn how to weave with wire. And so I was like, I know just the guys. So then we went and like saw, you know, how you weave on these like really more complex with complex materials, with like a crazy amount of string, with crazy material. And then after that, we went to go see Sarah Rosalina because I was like, no, and then we should see how computers and people can weave. And so it was this really amazing thing just to like, yeah, to ask people to freely share knowledge. And yeah, just to like acknowledge that, like a lot of the wealth and the status that has been accumulated for so long by so many is has been at the expense of other people, and other cultures have been gleaning information from indigenous cultures for so long and never acknowledging them, like thinking about Porfirio's pieces that are over there, on the right side of that wall, and thinking about modernism and thinking about like Joseph Albers and Annie Albers, and thinking about that nobody really knew that they were looking at Mitla when Joseph Albers was coming up with his designs that were also like, oh my god, like the optic, blah blah blah, and all these different things that usually don't get acknowledged as indigenous contributions. Maybe I'll stop talking.
No, that was great. Thank you. And earlier I mentioned that I had to leave out of the community. So when you think about creativity, and I'm gonna just lean there for a minute. You, in a sense, that you have to prove with the certification that you're an artist. Tremendous amount of depth, right? So it's almost like when I think about that, it's almost like you train to be creative. And in where I come from, it is a gift from the greater being. It's a responsibility you have. And so in our community, early 1900s, our small community was, and many around, was entering into a global economy. Prior to that, it was trading with other indigenous community villages. That's when it was what you see here were blankets, not rugs, not tapestry or conceptual work. And where we start to sell our weavings to tourists, which is tremendous blessing because now we only depend on that part in order for us to feed our family. But the trade-off about that is that what so-called traditional today was modified to a specific market. So I'm late 70s kid, and started on the loom when I was 12, so like towards the end of or late 80s, when the market was already into a point where it was compromised to a repetitive, cheap, fast. So the romanticization of who we are, it starts to get on its peak, right? Now, when you think about creativity, it is almost all the objects around ourselves that we need to live, we made it ourselves, including our homes. So the aesthetic, the natural aesthetic of these communities, it was driven by the community with a very free creative spirit. I was now compromised into a loom to work certain way, to work certain pace as far as time, because that's how we earn our living. And so I did not like that at all. I was really bored. I couldn't really, get a lot done. And I was just always, as a kid, had a lot of energy, as always thinking and imagining stuff, making toys, making just things, right? And so I wove till I was 17 years old. What I learned from there is my parents' integrity of the craftsmanship, the responsibility, a good quality, a good quality rug. What does that mean? It's like straight edge, good structure of the weaving, good tension, things like that, that it has to be that way in order, so you could sell it, right? But as far as creativity, it was frozen. So I was inspired to migrate. Almost everyone I knew in my generation don't live in the village anymore because the market now is conformed to a few families in the community. Only a few families had access to market, and I was the labor of those families and the labor of that market. And wanted to give that I wanted to illustrate that a little bit, not just to kind of think of myself as something to I feel sorry about myself or anything, but it's just that resilience of creativity. In a way, by me migrating, I've actually saved my creative spirit, right? And to continue to imagine, to continue to earn my right of imagination and create. And also to challenge perceptions. When you hear people say, where you live, I was in Santa Fe. I still do sometimes markets, like the folk art market. And so there people goes and they're like, oh, which village, which country, which all this. And I'm like, and it's such a beautiful village. Where? In Southern California, it's called Ventura. Some people really do get mad at me. And it's like the perception of what should look like, what we should make, and things like that. These kind of conversation and opportunity for us to create these kind of spaces has been tremendous, right? And to open up these perception and to challenge and asking these kind of questions. What these things even mean? What do I have to have a certificate to participate? Or what kind of work I should do? What kind of materials I should be using? And so not only through this conversation, but I think this is at the moment, it's extremely historical because it is absolutely rare to see, or the majority of indigenous artists you see, and they've actually have gone to school. And it is so rare to see an artist that has walked those spaces and open up that hole through the fine art circle or the conceptual art. One piece that I have at the that I made for the Santa Barbara Contemporary Art Museum. It is a cycle of life design, which is one of the most celebrated design within the textile of Oaxaca. This design, it's inspired on the walls of Mitla. And you gonna see this design almost on every traditional Zapotec rugs. So I was asking myself, what happens when you remove that symbolism, when you remove it away from the rug? And you create a performance piece on the gallery. How narrative and perception or context shapes how we consume tradition and culture, right? When this design it's in a rug and it is an environment that is completely oppressed, it's just a cheap product. But now you move it and you make this into conceptual work. What happens and why that happened? Why there's a huge change there? People say, well, it becomes a conceptual piece. Why is that? Right? And so those are some exercises like what we did with Craftback. It's an exercise, it's an analysis of the market and how tradition is consumed and how we approach and think about tradition and culture and kind of the comparison. I think what we're doing here in a bigger way, it's like in a way to kind of weighing out and comparing tradition and fine art or tradition and contemporary approach or tradition and academic approach to these kind of, which at the end of the day, if we want to just value and appreciate creative, it doesn't matter where it comes from, who makes it, how it's looked like. It just the creative soul. It's being celebrated and just that, right?
And I think in thinking about that stuff, maybe I'll talk a little bit about this column and like what I hope that you take from it, and we'll be like weaving when we're done talking. We'll be weaving together, but so will you. So you're gonna also be part of it.
You're a weaver now.
Yes. Today you are also a weaver. Maybe tomorrow you will be that again. Because I think that it is, yeah, in a weird way, what you're talking about reminded me of. So the way that I got to the place of weaving and making the way that I do, which is more like what's on the other wall over there, where it's all like weird and like that's a family portrait for me of like those like kind of ghostly, things that are carrying essentially trash from the LA River. So the way that I got there was because I had gone to Oaxaca because, yeah, my family never traveled. We only went to like camp in Baja, like down, like pretty close to where we lived. And then every once in a while we got taken to Disneyland. But that was it. And so when I got my first fellowship, I told my sister like, oh, well, we should travel through Mexico because we've never really like been shown like anything about our Mexican identity because my parents could never afford to travel. And so then I was like, all right, let's go to all these like different craft places. And it was just in the beginning of when I started getting interested in textiles. And so we went to Oaxaca and I was like, okay. And then we went to Chiapas. It's like the southern part of Mexico that's closest to Guatemala. And it's the region that has, in the Americas, the highest concentration of indigenous people. And they are, for the most part, of Mayan descent. And so there, people were weaving on a backstrap loom, which is a pole or a tree or something that you tie, like one of these soft kind of looms with sticks to a thing, and then you weave using your body as the structure to be able to make things with. And so, yeah, I was like, oh, like at RISD, we learned on these like European looms that were very, like there was like very like, these are very nicely made European looms. And I was just wondering like, oh, I wonder why different people work with different types of tools. And I always like feel bad saying this, but yeah, when I went to Oaxaca and I saw that in Teotitlan, they were working with these really huge step looms and they were just really big and they just looked really heavy and like you needed a lot of space and a lot of like wood to be able to do the thing. And so I asked in Oaxaca, oh, why do you guys work on these really huge ones? And they said, the family that I was visiting said, oh, because the Spanish brought it. And so then when I went to Chiapas and I was in this really, really tiny town called Sinacantan, and I asked, oh, why do you guys weave like this way? And they were like, because we always have. And so then I was like, oh shit, I have a choice. And so I was like, I never even knew that you had not even like a choice, I guess, that there was like different ways of getting to the same thing that connected us very differently to what we were producing. And so I became really like obsessed with like thinking more about how the body is connected and how the material is a witness to whatever the body is experiencing. But then also thinking about like, oh, I should actually probe all of the methodologies that I use to make my work with because I can. I don't have to use like a hammer to hammer something. Like I can use a rock. I can, there's many ways to get to the same thing. There's many ways of knowing. And once I realized like I have a choice in what I work with, then I started inventing a bunch of weird ways of building structure and working that allowed other people to be able to participate because the loom is so technical. that it's really difficult to actually like to set it up and to teach people how to do it. And I just kept thinking about how it was still a barrier. The knowledge to work with a big loom was still a barrier to engagement. And if I figured out a weird way that had no rules to use kind of the freedom of not needing a big expensive tool, then I could essentially do it like at the park. I could do it like in the car. I could do it on a chair. I could like teach like a toddler. I can teach someone in their 90s. It doesn't even matter. It allows us all to be artists. It allows all of us to equally participate in this thing that we're so many of us, you know, like as like femme identifying folks, as women, as people of color, all these different things, as indigenous people, as whatever, we're constantly being told that we're like filtered out of whatever it is that they, you know, like built this system for. And so I liked that in the systems that I was starting to build, there was no requirement for entry. Like it was just, I guess maybe you just need like a hand. And even if you don't have a hand, we can figure out some other way. But I think it's important for me to tell you guys that because this thing is not a backstrap loom. It's a weird invention that I came up with the week of install so that you guys could feel what it feels like to be connected, to be tethered to something. And then in turn, because there's 3 of them, my hope was that you would also feel connected to the other people on the other sides of that pole. So this thing, even though it looks pseudo-technical, there's no rules. The only thing is you put that around your waist, and then you sit or you pull back, and then that gives the strings enough tension that you can weave in and out. But the idea was that you can braid, you can knot, you can do whatever you want. And in the end, this ends up being a really beautiful expression of just play, of just, you know, freedom. It doesn't have to be anything very perfect.
You want to see the woven stuff that has happened up until now?
Maybe we'll do it. I was thinking that maybe we should talk about cochineal, and then we should stop, and then people can play with us, or ask questions and then play, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to start the cochineal?
I'll start the cochinilla, but before I start the cochinilla, just a little bit about to what you're saying here. There is very few, and me coming from the traditional aspect, just on the tip of proximity to power and choice. It's extremely rare to get to this point. When I say proximity to choice and power, that I actually have a voice to say, no, I don't want to do that. Yes, I want to do that. No, I don't want to show there. Yes, I want to show there. And that I actually, I have the opportunity to play. Within the community, you don't have a right to play because you're putting food on the table. You know, if you go to an art school, they teach you to play and be free, use this material. We don't have that privilege. I didn't have that. This is how you do it, and you better hurry up. Because the client needs it, because whatever it is, it's like, it is such a, how do I say it, Bridget, it is such a, it's almost, you know, being a 12 years old, it's like a child labor, you know. And I'm at the point of my career where like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna weave out of a metal and talk about other object that I care about. I wanna make a performance piece because that's what I wanna do. Yes, I still try to earn a living. I still try to sell. I still make functional work. I still try to, you know, I'm still dealing with, you know, the financial situation, the struggle, trying to put food on the table. I still have a family to feed. I still have a family in Oaxaca. I still maintain a family studio in Oaxaca that I've established 17 years ago that depends on the success of my work. But this is actually the tip of, like I said, and I'm repeating myself, it's this tip of an opportunity for me to say, this is what I want to do. and there's museums where say, that's cool, let's do it. That wasn't like that before. I had to just like walk and lonely out in the desert to prove myself. And I had to, just continue digging up to be able to prove myself. And I think, as I said earlier, this is a historical exhibition, a moment. I think this is going to allow a much more broader conversation for the people that are coming behind, and hopefully we'll have access to continue having access to opportunities. All right, so I'll leave that at there. I'll rest with that. Cochineal insect. It is a small larvae insect that are breed on prickly pear cactus. Cochineal insect and the technology about farming, but also transforming the material into color. It is one of the most important innovation in the arts in the world. Cochineal insect influence or maybe changes the course of the art in the world. Its medicine practice usage, I believe that it maybe in the Mesoamerica or maybe within communities like my community, how it's also used for different ceremonies. Maybe it stayed more in the Mesoamerica or what we know as Mesoamerica region. But as far as the use of the color in the arts, that definitely influenced the cultures around the world. When you look at a piece that's dyed with cochineal insect, it is actually an archive. It's an archival object where if you have the opportunity to study and understand the science, the chemistry, the structure of the weave itself, and how much information there is within the piece, it is a supercomputer, and it is like so much information there. And so for me, obviously, as a descendant of the culture that might have domesticated an insect, genetically modify a wild insect, I don't know, thousands of years or hundreds of years ago, into how it exists now, it is not only a responsibility, but also it allows me to not only communicate from that perspective and be able to tap on that DNA information, not only the knowledge of transforming material into color, but also what it really means, especially spiritual aspect of what this is, right? And so it takes about 60 to 70,000 of the insect to make 1 pound of dye stuff. It takes about 1,200 leaves of prickly pear cactus, which is the food of the insect, to make 1 kilo. So when we think about community-based work, that's what it means. Livelihood, exchanging knowledge and supporting knowledge, like really depending on one another. My work couldn't exist without the cochineal farmers or the indigo farmers, let's say. And so that is something that was already lost, that knowledge, by the time I was born and raised. The use of actually natural material, natural pigment for color was already extinct by the time I was growing up within our community in Oaxaca overall. And so it took me a couple years, and while I set up my studio at my place in Oaxaca, while I was living in Southern California working at construction, going back to Oaxaca, the research experiment, and my parents say, well, I'm too old for this. You have to look for other assistants to help you. And that's how other family members came into my studio. And after a couple of years, we were able to successfully recreate these recipes and create actually work that it could be available for sale.
Okay. So my cochinilla, my cochinilla, like I guess point of like when I became super interested in and like I guess just like obsessed with it was I learned about it. I'd never known anything about it. I learned about it when visiting Totitlan, that like same trip where I learned about why people do backstrap weaving. And I was just blown away. I had no idea that when I started looking at like into the history of cochinilla, that the cochinilla, I just think it's so crazy. So its name in Spanish is La Grana Cochinilla, which means the grain cochineal. So when the Spanish came, and then they like, you know, like discovered this amazing red that didn't exist anywhere else before contact with the Americas, they obscured its origin by making it called the grain. So then the whole world was trying to figure out how to grow this red grain to make dye out of. And so then they like cornered the market on this red that the world had never seen before. That's in like the most well-known like Renaissance paintings and stuff. And so I became super interested in thinking about like different times when craft was used to fuel colonization. And so, you know, thinking about its history and how it became this huge market that the Spanish had, but then it also then became as valuable as silver, and it fueled their further exploitation and like pillaging of the Americas. And I was just like, oh my God, this is crazy. And why don't people know about this? And then I came back. I had someone visiting from out of town. And so then he wanted to go to Magic Mountain to Six Flags. And so we went to Six Flags. And I was walking around there and I saw a cactus with cochinilla. And I was like, what? Like the cochinilla lives here? And then, so then I became really obsessed with finding different places where it lived. And then I found that it lived like almost on every corner, on every block in LA. And it lived in all these different places, and it started to kind of become this like weird, like cousin, relative, like friend that would say hi wherever I traveled. It was, yeah, like what made me feel, yeah, like I somehow connected to these different places. And so I came to kind of experience and understand the cochinilla as a borderless body that made up an area that I knew, even though my family's not from Oaxaca, but my family's from like more the middle of Mexico, but it's all the same areas. Not all the same areas. It's the areas also that has cochinilla in Michoacan. And so, yeah, like I was just like, oh my God, this, you know, this weird, yeah, like kind of like thread that keeps connecting me, and understanding how ridiculous borders are, and how, yeah, just like all these weird human concepts that we come up with. Porfirio one day said that he watches the cochinillas have babies, and I was like, what? What do you mean? And he was like, well, they're female. And then it was like, holy shit, like, oh my God. So then that became this other like layer of love for the cochinilla, because I was like, I can't believe that they're also like they're another like female that bleeds, even though it's not her blood, but the color. But I like started to relate to the cochinilla in this way of still like of still kind of like tying in symbolically for me to other border bodies that like thinking about femicides and thinking about, you know, women forced to work in maquiladoras under really bad conditions, and other like femme-bodied, yeah, like natural things that are subjugated, that are controlled, that are, you know, squeezed out of their juice and controlled and commodified. And so then, yeah, she became this very, very important symbol in my life. And so this is, yeah, how we got so the cochinilla and weaving, yeah, is how we ended up becoming friends. We've been friends for a long time.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't even say. At this point, I don't know who's adopting who.
But it's one of the most beautiful things I think that when we're both parents, our kids we each have kids that are similar age, at least one kid. But I feel like in so many different ways, I wish that more people modeled good behavior, and like taught each other different ways of existing together. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and that we can hopefully through our friendship also inspire others to open up their resources, their homes, their studios, their knowledge systems, because there's there's enough for all of us. There's no need to hoard anything. And I'm just so grateful for having learned how to really be in
No,
mutual respect and care and love for each other.
Thank you. Likewise, I always say, well, I feel like Tanya, it's these other, in the past I've said siblings, but these other really deep connections, spiritual and thinking. Someone was saying at one of the walkthrough we had here, it's like, well, what did you learn? Did you go to art school? And I go, no. And how do you think? Like, there's a performance piece on this other side about I wove a piece at the same time span when I crossed the border, using my own clothing, using my own, and very conceptual thinking, right? Like, how do you think about all these things, right? Like, she was just really trying to get to a place to where, like, if you didn't go to school, then how do you do all these things, right? But beyond that, and if I have something to an answer for that, well, it is this bigger collective, right? Of this way of thinking and coming together and sharing with so many other creatives that I've kind of came along from my journey that has been there for me, and Tanya's one of them. And so, thank you.
Which is my questions?
Thank you. This is wonderful. You can feel the warmth between you, so it's really great and such thoughtful insights. So I just have two comments, just from my experience, that I would love to hear your thoughts about. One is that in Oaxaca, the materials and the created things that I felt most strongly attracted to were utilitarian objects. The baskets made from carrizo, the clay work in comals and that sort of thing. So you could talk about the place and the challenge for those artisans or whatever artists who are making those kinds of objects. And then the other thing was that I worked a lot with farmers, maize farmers, and to me there's a lot of creativity in those farmers' work, in their ability to understand and successfully grow food. And there's also a very strong aesthetic sense. Farmers showed us how they selected seeds so that they could stand on a hill and look out at pink blossoms on their maize. So it's an aesthetic experience for them. So just, your ideas about those.
Yeah, I think in everything that we do, you could be a clerk at the bank and you're so good and talented about that, if that's what your calling is. Of course, once you get to or in the cultural context, you get to communities in Oaxaca, you're right, it's like there's basketry. There's so much, creativity there. I think the biggest struggle is that those traditions was very oppressed, and to be able to earn a living, and the difficulty, like, you have these talent, you know how to make beautiful baskets, but it's really hard to make a living doing that. So how do you do that, right? And so that's always the difficult thing, and you have to. For me, if I would have just make my functional work, which there's nothing wrong with that, it would have been really hard to move forward and my work would never value, you know, as a fine art would have been. And so now you see younger generation like, no, thank you, that's beautiful, but I'm gonna go and be a lawyer and or be an engineer somewhere, you know. And so you see a lot of these traditions are being dying out because of there's not enough reward within the younger generation. They don't see that opportunity. But I read, and especially when you think about migration now, then it gets triple. Yeah, the difficulty, because a lot of these younger generation don't even have the opportunity to reconnect with their cultural identity. They remember their grandmother weaving, or they saw their parents weaving back home, and now they don't see that. It's the voters and geopolitical, just like it almost like wants to affect your brain, to where it wants to shift the way you look at even yourself when you come to another place. I myself didn't think that one day I would have been able to create my work here in the United States. But I will go out in the mountains and find the dye stock that I use. And I'm like, wait a minute. If this plant grows here and I could recognize nature, the landscape looks the same to me than it was out in Oaxaca. That just really helped shift my thinking. I'm like, I'm home. This is my ancestor has been here this whole time, right? I'm in the land of Chumash people, of course, but the interaction of the indigenous people of the Americas has always existed, and so that triples when we're talking about diaspora, and also because it's not rich culturally for me to say I really want to go to Oaxaca, but my neighbor's a weaver. That's not cool. I want to go to Oaxaca, right? And so it's the incentive. It's non-existent, uh, and there's 200,000 Zapotec just inside of California. I don't know. I can't remember what was the other. Creativity and farming. The aesthetic. Do you have anything to add to?
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Don't get discouraged. We're gonna start weaving soon, okay?
I have a quick question having to do with the whole issue of cultural boundaries. And actually, 30 years ago, bought a very beautiful rug in Oaxaca, cochineal, very beautiful thing that is still vibrant. But the design was Navajo, because at that time, most of the weavers, I think, were trying to appeal to the American marketplace. And I don't know why I mentioned this, but I wonder, you're in Ventura now, which we're very familiar with. Do you do your work there as well? And do you feel the American sort of cultural pressures in your work, or how do you define what your designs are? Is it multicultural, or how do you think about that now? The whole Navajo thing seems to have come and gone, I think.
Yes, good question. And so two things. Mayoristas, which is the wholesalers, arrived in Oaxaca. The earliest I've ever interviewed, 1972. And a couple of them arrived around that time. And one, extremely successful, it was like thousands of rugs, was exporting, mainly to the United States, some to Europe. And that brought tremendous blessing to us, because there was now work, right? But then you now see, okay, well, Teotitlán, it's great skilled weavers, labor's cheap, so let's do business, which is great. But then they start to bring in catalogs of other designs within the community. And after a while, the Navajos are like, wait a minute, where these rugs are coming from? And they're the fraction of what we of our weavings. And I can imagine some of them will be sold as Navajo weaving. So later on, actually, the Navajo Nation sued the Zapotec Nation from Teotihuacan because they thought there was, and rightfully, there was an abstraction of knowledge, design, and so forth. There's an exploitation. And so it was never our fault because the communities, they were just asking for work. The middleman's like, nice, just deep in that pocket, right? But now putting two relatives into a problem, right? And so someone was thinking only about himself or herself. And so you have that problem and you have that just opportunity for work. And my work in Ventura, like you say, do I work, I just wanted just to ask a question. What do you think? Do I make my work in Ventura?
No, I'm just curious to know if you do.
No, okay. Yeah, I just want to ask, like, anybody, do you guys think, like, I could make my work in Ventura? Yes, because it doesn't, it doesn't. There was one question was, I said, I really like these pieces. I had some of my functional work on my online store. And someone said, I like these pieces. Where it was made, Ventura or Oaxaca? That was hard for me to process. And that's why, I'm sorry, that's why I asked these questions. Because my hat is my house, right? You know, my culture, it's here, and it's here, right?
I apologize. I think what I was asking really was, you don't harvest cochineal here in Ventura, do you, or do you?
Yes, so I have been farming some cochineal. For those of you that have visited my studio, so I have been farming some cochineal within the studio. The problem, well, I have a small studio out in West End Ventura, and since I'm not there every day, and it's really close to the beach, they don't really like cold. They like harder, more drier. So it's hard for me to have a successful harvest. But then what I harvest is very small amount. And so now we have a home on East End. So I'm actually farming cactus. The first generation is about to be harvested soon, and I'm gonna be investing cochineal. And so, but yeah, a lot of what I use as dyes, I go up in the mountains and collect them. And just not too long ago, someone with 6,000 acres talking about 6,000 acres and saying, you could come to my land and see what you're gonna find. So that has been beautiful. So there's a lot of the dye stuff that we think as just in Oaxaca, they're here, right? They're grown here. And so, yes, so that's how my work is living in these two places, multicultural. My wife says, just sometimes you're dreaming and like you're speaking something. It's not Spanish nor English. And sometimes like you were streaming and I could hear it as you were speaking English. So I think all these multi-level of, these hybrid or mutation, you can think of it in so many ways. Like I'm grateful to be able to expand my thinking because as growing up, I didn't really spend time in the city. So I was a caveman. Really, no, you could think of it like I didn't really spend a lot of time in the city. And so even me go to Mexico City now, I still a little nervous sometimes because that's where I didn't grow up like that. But here I am in the United States. I have a show with Tanya here or in Dubai somewhere that I've shown my work in the past. Exposed to so many things and has enriched my life tremendously. I live in a much more urban America that has enriched my life. Have met so many great friends, and so I don't say complexity because there's this thing that us as Mexican or Latino said. In Mexico, they said, "No eres de aquí ni de allá." You're not from there nor from Mexico, and I'm saying you're right. I mean, from two places. Gee, that's pretty cool. And you're only from one place, right? And so, speaking three languages, there's so many things that it has enriched in my life. So I take the positive of that. And so all these conversations right now, my work is really diving to like migration, what that means. in a Native American context, and so all this enrichment, it's like a boiling pot, and I'm just creating from there.
So I want to say something also before, we go to the next thing. But cochinilla does grow very happy in Ojai.
Yes.
And Ojai is very close to Ventura. And Porfirio would like at some point in his life to have like a Oaxacan cultural center. But he needs land. So if anybody you know has extra, like little bit, please, like for real. Let Porfirio know because if it's hot, the cochinilla is happy, and we need to get my friend some land.
Yeah, because it's only gonna inspire. Like there have been interacting through this project. We have been interacting with indigenous, mainly Mixteco indigenous from Oaxaca in Southern California. And when the first a girl that was in encampment, and she has just got released and met some family in Ventura County. She and other youth Oaxaqueño indigenous came to my studio. When she walked in my studio, her eye was just went because her family is a weaver. But later on, when we're talking to her, she goes, "Well, it's amazing. These could be done here. Remember this thing? That's and so."
Yeah, and there was so we did for this project a lot of work with indigenous Oaxacan youth whose families are mostly farm workers, and it was one of the saddest but I guess like hopeful things. One of the students was like, "Oh, I didn't know that I had to come to the U.S. to learn about my culture," and so I was like, "Oh shit," let's get Porfirio some hot land for free.
Another question? Any other questions, or we'll go the weaving part?
Do you guys have any other questions?
We'll take one last question before we start the collaborative weaving.
Of the population of the world, of course, there's a large percentage that is indigenous. They're invisible, disrespected. The unkindest cut of all is they're unseen, and they know they're unseen. You two are different. Did your creative journeys to go from the functional to fine art give you some window into how to make that same window available to your indigenous colleagues who didn't have the creative spirit to give them that outlet or to call attention to themselves from others in the community? How do you feel about your own journey and your indigenous colleagues?
I guess like this is what we're doing, and this is exactly like what we're most concerned about. Because it took me like a super long time to be okay with saying I'm an artist, because of how much my parents struggled to provide me what they did, and as like working class people, like you're like, no, like art is for people that have money. Art is for people that go to like study and read things. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's having all this, really difficult time making a living because she's a furniture maker. And so this, idea of like even like how do you make a living on functional things is something that exists everywhere. Friends that are potters that make bowls, like they, can't really make that much money with bowls. And I think it's hard. There's all these like different layers of like, like personal like exploration, going through like undoing so much guilt, so much different things that make us feel like being proud of ourselves or wanting to do something for ourselves is something bad, So I feel like like, yeah, we're still in it trying to figure out how to, yeah, how to like show different ways of surviving and of doing stuff. And still kind of struggling with even like how do we be okay making weird stuff? Because sometimes that's like what art is like sometimes just art is just weird stuff. And then you're like, it's called art, you know? But yeah, I think we're in the middle of that and actively trying to figure out ways of doing that. Especially for younger generations, as we realize, I know that we don't look that old, like to you from there. No, I know, but we feel our responsibility as we get older. We're both, yeah, like understanding that also we're getting into these different places where we are mentors to people, where we are like sometimes like junior elders, you know? And so we, yes, I would try to not say it because I don't want to limit, you know, what the double of this gets me to. But yes, but we are very much, yeah, like I both constantly thinking about how do we open up more, push more, so that more people can be part of, you know, participating.
Yeah, definitely. We hope that anything that we do, good stuff, would inspire other people, that it's possible. Um, and sometimes I do think about like my own kids. My own kids, were born and raised in Ventura, and they weren't exposed to these art at the very beginning. It's much more later in life because I was spending a lot of time in Oaxaca, and how the world will see me, they'll rather see me in Oaxaca. So I say, okay, I'll just say that I live in Oaxaca, but it's not true, because I just think that if I say I'm in the United States, they're like, boy, that's not so cool. So I'm serious. Those are so many things I've gone through, so many, and through the pandemics, I say, with all respect, fuck it. It is what it is. This is what you're looking at, and I'm so sorry I don't live in Oaxaca and I don't look what you think I should look like. I'm sorry. I'm not your guy no more. Because I was thinking about my kids, and to your question, I said, what am I doing? Like, my kids like are not even part of what I'm doing. It's like they're not even inspired by me because I'm always gone. And now, if you ask my younger son, like, what are you gonna do when you grow old? When you get it? No hesitation, like artist. He likes to try. He likes. So sometimes we can't, think about like how this thing is spreading, and I really hope that it's inspiring a lot of people. But when you see it so close to you, like your kids, that's great, rewarding. And my kids are very proud to be indigenous, and they'll tell you, oh, we're indigenous, like, that's so beautiful because I didn't feel that way at the beginning. And so I really hope that there's some good things that are happening. And I just want to finish these with this as well, as when I think about Earth, when I think about Earth Day especially, I was meditating about this. I said, well, Earth is one home, and everyone that lives within the home are all roommates, and all the creatures and we're part of the ecosystem of Earth. And I say, well, the Earth does not recognize or does not know who's who, what color are you, how much money you have. You're just human, and you could be a butterfly or a sheep walking around or whatever it is. Like, we're equal in all aspects when it comes to nature. And I just do think about when it comes to that, or thinking about that, that's really, at the end of the day, that's who we are, right? It's just coming together, helping each other out, and coming and strengthen our communities and uplifting one another. At the end of the day, that's really, to me, that's what Earth is. Because if shit hits the fan tomorrow, like, we're all in it because we live at the same house, right? And so that's really, so when I think about all these things, and of course, I've just learned so much about also Ventura is my community, and just love it dearly. trying to be as part of the community as much as I can, continue to learning and continue to thrive. And but yes, that's really what when I think about this thing is there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of things happening in the world, but in reality, we're just we're roommates here. And I don't think you and me are going to Mars, right? We're not going to Mars. Let's just be real. We're here, right? At the end of the day. So thank you for being here and joining us.
Okay.
It's been a minute since I like since you yeah.